Well, hey everyone, welcome to our Manager 101 webinar. This is a webinar where we're going to talk about everything I wish I knew as a first-time manager. So as people are joining and hopping in, there's a couple of kind of housekeeping things I want to send and go over. But as we're doing that for you here on the webinar, as well as for everybody in the chat, what I would like to know is, what is your favorite season of the year? What's your favorite season of the year? Oh, lots of fall. Okay, everybody in the chat's going. Isaac, I want to hear your favorite season first.
Well, it's funny. It's like it's been a long summer, so it's like obviously fall is just the best season ever. But no, for me, I would actually say spring. So
Okay.
I love warm weather, and so transitioning out of winter and into like things warming up again, oh, I love that. So
Perfect. Courtney, what about you? What's your favorite season of the year?
I agree with the chat, fall, but it's like September 1 through December 31st. After that, I'm not interested in winter, but fall kind of extends for me. But right now, it's 97 degrees in Pennsylvania. That's not fall.
What?
It's garbage at the moment. So not a big fan of this September, but most Septembers I'm a big fan of.
Okay. So we're not a fan of the hot garbage season, but yeah, 97, that's gross. Lexi, what about you? What's your favorite season of the year?
Summer, always. It could be 105 every summer and I'd be happy. The hotter,
Really?
the better. I know. I grew up suffering these long, cold winters in Wisconsin, and
I
I
understand.
just moved as far south as I possibly could. And now I live on the Gulf in Houston, Texas, and I'm like, bring on the sunshine.
That is a way to solve for that. Yeah. So my favorite season of the year, I would agree it is fall, but specifically it is football season. Okay. So the Chiefs, they play the Detroit Lions tonight. And for all of you who accuse me of being a fair weather fan, I've been a Chiefs fan for longer than Patrick Mahomes has been alive. Okay. So I remember some really, 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 really atrociously bad times, and am grateful for what we currently have going on. We'll see if Travis Kelce plays tonight. No one else really cares about that, but it's fine. As we're getting going here, I want you guys to be thinking about, connected to fall, do we like pumpkin spice lattes or not? So as I lay out some housekeeping things, pumpkin spice lattes, yay or nay? But be sure, Eddie says meh. It's pumpkin spice lattes are super mid. I don't know. That's what the kids say, I think. I don't know what they say anymore. But turn your channel or your chat to everyone, so that everyone can engage. But what we're doing today is we're going to be sharing some practical wisdom from you all. So that's why you are here, our panelists, and hear a little bit about what they wish they knew as a first-time manager. So we have some questions prepared that we're going to chat through, and then at the end we're going to have some Q&A time so that we can answer questions from everyone who is here, questions that have been sent in before, and make sure that we make this as practical for you as possible. So we'll get to as many questions as we possibly can, but if for some reason we don't get to yours, or we run out of time, feel free to email us at hello@leadr.com, or you can just directly connect with your CSM manager. Of course, later today, we'll send out the recording of this and with the replay link and some additional resources. So we want to set you up with some practical things about what you should know, or what we hope we would have known as first-time managers. And sometimes in webinars or events or conferences, we can go into those and we're really excited about them. And then at the end of them, someone says, well, what'd you learn? Or how did it go? And you're like, I don't even know. There's so many things that happen. I'm not even sure what to process. And so my encouragement for everybody who's on the webinar today would be just think of one thing. Like if you can wrap your mind around, oh, that was one helpful nugget or one helpful piece of information that I can apply, that will be a really helpful way for you to take something from today and actually put it into action without feeling overwhelmed with all of the things that are talked about and said. So those are kind of the ground rules for our time. And what I'm going to do is we'll hit the agenda, and then we're going to hop right into some introductions and go for it, okay? We like it. Okay, so Here's the agenda for our time. We're going to do introductions. We're going to remind everyone of the 4 different types of managers. Then I have a few questions for the panel here, and then we're going to do Q&A. So it's a really simple webinar for our time today. So let's do this. Let's introduce ourselves. I'll go first, and then we'll roll around in order here on the screen. But my name is Dan Cogswell. I'm the director of customer growth here at Leadr. I've been here for about 2 years and have been in a few different positions, but love the opportunity to get to work with all of our partners and our customer success team. So that's me. Courtney, what about you?
Yeah, my name's Courtney Balbin. I am the manager of customer outcomes, which is just a fancy way of saying I lead our team of customer success managers. I've been at Leadr for coming up on about 1.5 years.
Thank you. Isaac?
Hello, hello. I'm Isaac Votter. I lead one of the software development teams here at Leadr. I've been at Leadr for a little over 2 years now, and actually joined as one of the frontline staff, an individual contributor, and got to be promoted into a management position while I was here. And it's been an amazing journey. So love it.
Thanks, Isaac. Lexi, bring us home.
Thanks. Nice to meet everyone. I am Lexi. I lead one of our sales teams here at Leadr. Been with the company now for 1 year. It's been a fun ride.
Excellent. Well, let's hop right into this thing. Thank you all for volunteering or being voluntold. I'm not sure how that really went, but for being a part of the conversation today. I'm really excited for everyone to get to learn from you and to hear from you. As a way to frame where we're going, I thought it might be helpful to review the 4 different types of managers. And so this is something that we refer often to when we're chatting with customers or people who are investigating Leadr. And the quadrants here I thought were really, really helpful, because what we know is that inconsistent leaders lead to unreliable results. And there's this balance that we're all struggling with to get right, which is, how do we invest in our people? Like, how do we care well for our people, but also how do we drive results? And so that can lead to these 4 different types of leaders. So you have the best friend leader, the lost leader, the bulldozer, and then the leader. Quick survey for the people here on the webinar. Who in their life has been more than one of these types of leaders in either their current role or previous roles? Same. Isaac, okay, I was gonna say Isaac has just been really consistent and nailing it. But yeah, I don't think anybody here who's on our team or anybody who is on the webinar wakes up in the morning and intentionally looks in the mirror and they give themselves a pep talk where they say, I want to lead people poorly today. I'm really hoping I blow it. I hope that I don't invest in my people, or I hope that I don't drive results. I really don't think that's anybody's intention, but we also often have done that, or have, well, maybe not people on the webinar, at least us here. Okay, I'm not sure what the people on the webinar joining us have done, but it's something that we do if we aren't intentional about how we engage and how we lead. So, to get us kicked off, here's what I'd love to know. We've all made mistakes and we've all had wins in managing people. And what I want you to do is I just want you to take a moment to reflect with me on your first manager role, whether that's the role that you're in now or one that you previously have had. Knowing what you know now, what is one piece of advice you would give a first-time manager?
Should we play popcorn?
I had a friend who always he always used to say, no one wants to go first, who wants to go second? So who would like to go second?
I'll go second, Courtney.
Oh,
I'm on
that's
it.
what happens. It's
Unreal.
messy.
Courtney,
Oh my
please go.
I'm on it. My first leadership role, if I could have told myself anything, now looking back, it's that you need to identify 2 things, and that is what makes your team tick, and what does success look like? And, so we could just redefine that in a different way of get to know your team and get to know your objectives or your targets. I, in my first role, absolutely fell in that lost leader category. I had low investment, low results. I thought people wanted autonomy, but I had no idea what I was giving them autonomy toward. And then when we weren't accomplishing anything, I was trying to find things for us to achieve, but really unrelated to anything. And so we were meandering pretty lost through the depths of lots of problems. And so if I could tell myself anything, it would be You've got to get to know your team, what makes them tick, both as a group and individually, and then you've got to know what you're aiming at.
Super helpful. This may or may not be a quick follow-up question, but when you figured out those are the things I need to pay attention to, was it a quick switch to, oh, I know what I'm doing, or was it a more gradual switch for you? Like, how did that impact your ability to perform in the role?
I think it was a quick switch in the sense that once I identified where I needed to focus, I didn't feel so lost anymore. But the process of feeling sure-footed in each of those areas was very gradual over time. And so once again, once I identified, okay, these are the things that are missing and are making me feel lost, great. But that process of getting to know my team and figuring out where are we headed, what should we be accomplishing, that was very gradual over time.
Yeah, cool. Lexi, what about you? What's one piece of advice you would give to a first-time manager?
Yeah, the big one for me was the curse of the knowledge. I had never heard of that until I moved into a leadership position, but it's the idea that not everyone knows what you know. And so you have to slow down and ensure that everyone has the same knowledge basis that you do and not make assumptions. And so I remember I would get really frustrated, like, well, what do you mean you don't know what a champion is? Or what do you mean you don't know what an assumptive close is? And then I realized I'm the one with a decade of experience. It's my job to share what these things mean and to build that common language for our team. And so taking a minute to not be frustrated and to explain. And then the opposite of that is to not swing too far the other way where you're constantly explaining everything all the time. There's like a right balance in the middle where I'm not offending my team, assuming that they all know nothing. They are smart, they know a lot. So yeah, it's been an interesting journey.
Nice. Isaac, what about you? As you're thinking about that one piece of advice you'd give to a first-time manager or yourself, what would it be?
Yeah, I think the one piece of advice that I would give to a first-time manager is really to you really have to kind of separate your success from yourself and put it on your team. Like your success as a leader is equal to your team's success. And what does that look like? In my mind, the best analogy is a sports analogy, which is ironic because I don't follow sports a lot. But like as a leader, I'm not gonna be the one throwing the winning touchdown pass. I'm not gonna be the one shooting the winning goal in the game. That's gonna be my team out there doing that, not me.
Yeah.
And so what does that look like in real life is if there's like an important decision, see if you can delegate it to somebody, give them the chance to make a win. If there's some important responsibility to take on, use that as a learning opportunity for one of your people. Don't grab all those and bring them to yourself, but use them as growth opportunities for your team. Let them shine, and by them shining, you're gonna shine as the leader.
Yeah, that's so good, Isaac. A couple thoughts on that before I say those things. If you're in the webinar chat, if you have some advice, something that you wish someone would have told you or that you would have known as you were becoming a manager for the first time, feel free to share that there so that we can all learn with you. Isaac, when you were talking about that, it's this reminder of there's a couple books which I feel like I have to reference at least once a webinar. But what got you there what got you here won't get you there is one of those. And then the other one is the E-Myth, which talks about people who are individual contributors who then have some success potentially as a manager and think, well, I could run this business, I could do this thing. And what's required at different levels are entirely different things. But for someone who goes from an individual contributor to a manager, it is a really hard shift, especially for those of us who like to succeed and do well and check things off lists and deliver things on time and all that, because now all of a sudden, to your point, the way that success is measured is not by what you individually accomplish or do, but by how well you support, lead, and accomplish things through your team to accomplish even more than you could by yourself, which is hard sometimes. It's hard. Let's take a look here. Make the mental promotion from individual contributor to a manager. Ooh, that way you will think differently. Thoughts on that, team here on the webinar?
Oh, I promoted myself mentally a long time ago.
Incredible. Incredible.
Confidence. What does my husband tell me? My confidence sometimes exceeds my competence. So, beware of those people too.
There you go. There you go. Dawn, I love that. Own your mistakes and allow your team to make mistakes and learn. Yeah, I think there's this idea of like psychological safety, which is we're all working on something together. And is it safe to bring my full self to the scenario? And am I allowed to make mistakes here as we're all working to build something together? Courtney, you can probably define that way more succinctly than I just did, but that's the idea around what it is. Lexi, you got a question here, and then we'll keep moving. Okay, so it says, Lexi, when you speak of the curse of knowledge, how much grace do you give when you continually repeat the same knowledge to your team? Okay, let me ask that question in a different way for Rochelle. When you feel like you just keep on saying the same thing over and over and over and over again, and it's not getting through to the team, how many times do you say it?
Yes, welcome to management, right?
Yep.
I recently read a book called The Advantage by Patrick Lencioni, and he talked about our roles as leaders is to be the chief reminding officer. We do not, I think there's like statistics around like to build a new habit, you need to do the thing 7 times. I mean, our job is literally to repeat ourselves all day long. And I get it. It is taxing and you just feel like, when is it going to click or when are they going to get it? And so if I'm not the person getting through, I will toss that off to someone else. Hey, Courtney, can you say this? This is what I'm trying to communicate, but it's not coming across the way that I want it to, or it's not sinking in. Can you share an analogy or have people repeat back to me what they've heard so that we can check for alignment? But it takes a long time.
Yeah.
Longer than I would have thought.
Yeah, no doubt. It's as someone who has kids, it is wild to me that I can say the same thing over and over again. Like, hey, bud, part of your chores is like unloading the dishwasher. Here's how you can help support the family. Here's what that looks like inside the house. And then somebody who's not my wife or I can say the exact same thing, literally verbatim, and someone that we know or whatever, and all of a sudden it's like brand new information to my kid. They're like, wait a second, you mean if I unload the dishes, that's like helpful to the family, and then it helps me to have some responsibility, and I can grow and maybe even earn some commission for chores because we do that in our house, not just paying them for nothing, all sorts of things. It's like, yeah, man, we've been talking about it for years. So whoop, knocked over my water. Anyway, let's keep moving on to the next thing so we don't get stuck here. But I found a quote as I was preparing for this webinar, and I wanted to get y'all's take on it. So let's take a look at this. It's a quote from Gene Mauch. I'm not sure how to pronounce it, but it's he was an MLB baseball manager for I think like 20 years or something like that with several different teams. And this quote is, you can't lead anyone else further than you have gone yourself. Agree or disagree?
Dan, I think Lexi, I think I very much disagree.
Tell me more.
Yes. Okay. So I think if that's true, then that means some other things like we would hope to be true. For example, hopefully the organization never grows beyond an organization you've worked at before, because that's new, uncharted territory. Hopefully there's no new technology or new structures or processes or procedures, because you won't be able to lead in that. And so I think that this is a pretty limiting mindset. I hear the intention behind it, I think, and I'm curious to hear your thoughts on it, Lexi, but I think that this is really about, if you're leading your team where you've never been before, can your character sustain you? Do you have enough trust and relational equity and people around you to bounce these ideas off of, to create spaces for accountability for yourself? Is this, to Isaac's point, a team mentality of we're all going here together and I have a specific role in this team, but we're not, it's not just me kind of charting this path and dragging some people along with me. So I think I really very much disagree, but Lexi, change my mind.
Well, I don't have to change your mind, but I will take the other side of it. I feel like I don't know everything under the sun. It would be impossible for me to know everything under the sun. And so therefore I can't suggest what I don't know. And so it's hard for me to, I am like the cap on my team. And I would hope that they can go and, one of the things that we talk about is I can't be the only source of learning on my team, because if I am, we will move very slow. And so I hope my team is going out and learning independently of me. But if they're not, then I'm the limiter there, because I'm the one bringing new content or new ideas or new resources to the team. So that's kind of my take on that quote.
Yeah, super interesting. It's like the law of the lid, Maxwell's law of the lid, is what you're talking about a bit there. Isaac,
Yeah, I've been
you're the tiebreaker. Or, I guess let's hear your thoughts on it, man.
yeah, I'm gonna cheat and just go right down the middle of the road here a little bit. But no, I mean I've been listening to what you were saying, Courtney, and you, Lexi, as well. And I think that's you're talking about different nuances of this, because this is quite complex. When I look at this, I think about culture. I think about the importance of a leader as a culture carrier of a team. If I start working late nights, my team's probably going to start working late nights. If I'm burning myself out, my team's going to burn themselves out. Uh, on the flip side, if I'm working really healthily, my team will probably focus on working healthily. That sort of a thing. And it's one of those situations where in engineering, we talk a lot about hard skills versus soft skills, right? Like people skills versus technical knowledge. And I think 100%, even in both those categories, like you're going to have folks on your team that are way better at them than you. I know I have engineers who are way smarter than me at the technical stuff. And I've got folks on my team who are also brilliant, charismatic people, have amazing people skills. But what I think this is really pointing to is, as a leader, you have to be imagining yourself as leading from the front. And if you start doing bad habits, your team's going to start repeating those bad habits. If you start making good habits, your team's going to start making good habits as well. So it's kind of like you should expect your team to be pursuing the bar of excellence that you set for them, whatever that bar of excellence looks like. So sorry, is that really vague? It
No,
might have been really vague answer.
no, you did great. You did great. And that's knowing you, that's the kind of answer I would expect from you. So it's like brilliantly handled, well done. I think I could argue either way. I think for me, maybe a way I'd modify the quote is you can't lead anyone else further than you are willing to go yourself. So that might be how I modify it. But we got some interesting comments in the chat, so keep them coming. This is super interactive, and I'd love to hear more. I wish we could have more conversation with these people, but we're going to move on so that we can get through these and then get to Q&A at the end. Next question, y'all ready for it? Maybe.
Ready.
Okay, we're moving on anyway, so it's happening. All right. So considering the quote that was just shared, as it relates to leading yourself, what have you learned about leading yourself as you've managed others?
Yeah. Consistency is like one of my personal goals, regardless of which seat I'm sitting in. But I realized how important it became as I became a manager. I would like my team to know exactly what they're going to get from me every single day. I am going to be in a positive mood, in a collaborative mood. I am going to be there to joke with them and support them. And so it's really hard when you're personally having a tough day to kind of put that aside and focus on the person in front of you rather than your own stuff. I have I've once had to go back and apologize. I had one of my employees, I was not in a good headspace, and she was telling me, I gotta go. And we had 45-minute schedules. Like, where does she have to go to? And I realized she had to go because I was not the consistent leader she needed that day, and she was trying to get off the call. And so I congratulated her afterwards. I was like, good job on leading up. I'm sorry that I didn't catch it sooner. But you were exactly right to like get off the call and let me just go deal with it on my own.
Yeah.
So not always great, but that consistency I think is really helpful.
Yeah. It reminded me of, or a couple caveats maybe is I heard someone say leaders can't afford to have a bad day, especially on a bad day. So it's like I get that, I appreciate that. There's also a bit of if we can't be vulnerable to some extent or acknowledge that, hey, it's a challenging day or that things are happening, that is a challenge. But another shout out to a book, but and this is Marketing by Seth Godin. He talks about this idea of doing the emotional labor. So doing the work of showing up consistently, regardless, or showing up to give whatever version of your best looks like that day, so that your team knows what to expect, especially as a leader, and they know. It helps to create trust. It helps to create that psychological safety and all those other things that are really essential for investing in your team and growing. But it's hard to do. It's super stinking hard to do. But so is working out consistently and lots of other things. So here we are. All right, Courtney, Isaac, talk to us. What have you learned about leading yourself as you've managed others?
Yeah.
From my
Go ahead, Isaac.
Okay, cool.
I will ask more directed questions. This one's on me. I've not been doing a good job. I will throw it to a person. Okay, I've taken the feedback. I'm going to apply it. It'll be great from here on out. Courtney, please go.
Building off of those same thoughts you and Lexi just shared, you have to be self-aware, but you can't be self-aware in a vacuum. And so feedback is utterly critical to self-awareness. Beyond that, I'm just perseverating in my own blind spots, right? And so I think you have to let your team, those that report to you, but also those around you, other leaders, consistently tell you what they're seeing. And then beyond that, you have to do the work, right? It's what you just said. Do the work to develop, to grow, to fill in those gaps. But if you're not self-aware, I don't think you're actually leading yourself.
Good thoughts. Isaac, see, I'm doing better. I'm shifting and adjusting. Isaac, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, no. So I think for me, one thing I've learned about leading myself when managing others is really like extending grace. So like, how much grace do I extend to myself? How much grace do I extend to my team members? There's been times where it's like, oh, I've messed up on something, and I had to catch myself. Will be like, if one of my peeps messed up in the same way, would I be as hard on them as I'm being on myself right now? And being a leader a lot of times means choosing which fires you put out each day, and you gotta let some fires burn. And being a perfectionistic leader is like you're setting yourself up for some bad days ahead. So you got to be willing to strike balances, you aim for excellence, but you got to strike balances most days. And likewise, it's reversed as well, where I've caught myself being a best friend manager, where I look at some deliverable that my team's done and been like, oh yeah, good job, good job. And then I was like, wait, if I made this, would I think that was a good job? Oh, never mind. Oh shoot, I need to be giving better constructive feedback to my team. They're not meeting the bar of excellence I should be expecting from them. So it kind of goes both ways. How much grace do you extend to yourself? How much grace do you extend to your team? Is it appropriately leveled?
Yeah. Really great thoughts. A couple of things for me as I think about this question for myself. One would be my calendar shifts wildly. So when I go from like being an individual contributor to then being a manager or being somebody who's leading people, I had like a real existential crisis when I first made that shift because I would go home at the end of the day and my wife would be like, hey, how'd the day go? And I was like, I didn't get anything done. And the challenge was, instead of knocking out tasks or completing projects or things, it's not that those things weren't necessarily happening. It's just I wasn't always the one who's then directly doing those things. So my day became so much more of context switching between one-on-ones with this person, leading and thinking through this strategic initiative, noticing this and asking questions about how we're working cross-functionally, planning for where we're going next month, next quarter, et cetera. And so it wildly shifted my day, and I had to measure success differently. So that's one thing that's there. The other thing is that if you want to lead others, you have to learn how to communicate. So regardless of how gifted you are in communicating in an individual contributor role, if you want to continue to grow in your ability to lead, whether it is in a scenario like this, whether it's over email, whether it is, however many different modes of communication you can think of, growing in that ability to communicate clearly and to drive action from it is an essential thing that I had to learn and continue to learn how to do well. So, couple thoughts. Next question, guys. We're crushing through this thing. We're doing great. You're doing so well. I'm going to do better and ask a more direct question to a person. So we're going to get that on this next one. All right. Our mission here at Leadr is to develop 1 million leaders. And so I'm curious, from your perspective, how are people development and performance management connected, Isaac?
That's a great question. In my mind, they're completely connected from the perspective of engagement. Are the people engaged? In that, the way you develop your people, the way you grow your people, you can be kind of lazy about it and just like only give feedback one way, not tailor your leadership style to your people. And then, all of a sudden you're surprised when they aren't performing well. And so it's one of those things where performance management should be a gradual process. There shouldn't be surprises. There should be feedback given as early as possible so that folks, when they walk into, let's say, a semi-annual or annual performance review, they can pretty much know what they're going to hear in that performance evaluation. And that's because you're doing the due diligence of regular conversations, regular feedback, regular growth with your people. Growth shouldn't be something that happens once or twice a year. Growth should be something that happens weekly, bi-weekly, every time you have a one-on-one with the people. So that's kind of how I see it.
Yeah, good thoughts. Lexi, what are your
Okay.
thoughts on that idea?
I have one calendar comment before we move on. I agree with you that all of a sudden,
From
my calendar, yes,
yeah,
hey, it's like a game of Pac-Man. And I was not prepared that like my time was no longer my time. It was my direct reports time. And that was a big shift of like, I mean, I knew it, but I didn't really know it. And so it became such a thing where I had to block off time to do my tasks so that I could more effectively help and be present with them. So yes. Anyways, people management, people development. Well, on the sales team, you would agree that, or oftentimes the idea is that everybody is motivated by money. That's why you're in sales. And so it's really easy to figure out like where you're going, right? You're just going to make more money. But that's not quite true. Not everybody's why is money. And so this idea of people development for me comes to why are you here? Where do you want to go? And if I'm not having those high level why conversations, it's really hard to have the direct feedback conversations because there's nothing to tie it to. And so if I tell you, Dan, you have to put these notes into Salesforce, and you're like, oh, Lexi is always on me about reporting, and I don't like reporting. I'm a salesperson. I don't want to write this stuff down. But if I don't tie that back to the why this is important, how it helps you get to where you want to go, then it almost just doesn't matter. So
yeah, good thoughts in that totally hypothetical scenario. Courtney.
It's going to probably be a lot of the same, but I think performance management informs development. I think development informs performance management. If I'm going into a performance management conversation and saying you did this well, you didn't do this well, and that's where it ends, there's the employee got nothing from that, the organization got nothing from that. We're kind of just spewing off subjective opinions and we're getting nowhere with it. And so the inverse is also true. If we're developing unto anything with no tie to the individual, their work, and ultimately therefore the organization, I think we're also missing the mark. And so we kind of, again, start to drift into that lost manager space that can be easy to get into, where we're checking boxes. I performance managed, I gave them feedback, and I'm developing them. They're reading 5 books a month. To what end, and how? And so those are kinds of, again, I think it's just piggybacking off of what Isaac and Lexi said, but I think they each inform one another.
Yeah, great thoughts. That prompts a follow-up question, which is, what if you're in a scenario where you're managing or leading people where someone is potentially of those 2 buckets, they're like a great cultural fit for the organization, but they don't achieve their outcomes, or maybe you have the inverse, right? They achieve their outcomes, but they're not a great cultural fit. Thoughts on that, Courtney? And then we'll go other places. But Courtney, thoughts on that?
To me, the first example you gave of they're a great cultural fit, but they're not achieving results, I would challenge the idea of them being a good cultural fit. Yep. If you really reflect on your culture. And so I think that's more of a leadership, organizational, reflective moment to say, hey, are there any unspoken values here, or unspoken standards that we say we value one thing, maybe it's aspirational, we really don't value this, and so we're kind of allowing people to skate by with low performance and low results, but say they're a cultural fit because they carry a certain type of energy, or they're charismatic, or whatever it is we're calling culture. I think the opposite of they're a high performer but they're a low cultural fit is a lot more challenging, because it's easier to, I think it's easier to quantify. And so it's easy to justify letting one of those pieces fall and keeping them on the team. But where I have learned to challenge myself on that idea is to look at the trickle effect. What does someone who fails to carry the intangibles or qualitative cultural qualities on a team, how does that impact the rest of the team, both in performance, in job satisfaction? I think it's, it's that one bad apple spoils the whole bunch. That's a limited analogy, but it's more difficult to execute on because all of the numbers point to all is well.
Yeah, great thoughts. I want to hear from Lexi after this, but I think that's why it is so important to have defined core values that also have connected, we call them behavioral norms or like subpoints, but what does this core value actually mean? So if we want to create exceptional customer experiences, awesome. How? What are the things that we're actually doing? Because if it's not defined, then you don't have a yardstick to measure against. Lexi, thoughts for you on the idea of cultural fit, performance, high performer, the balance of those things?
Yeah, for me on a personal level, I agree with you, Courtney, that having someone who is a high performer but not a culture fit is more tricky for me. And I think it comes down to this. I think those culture conversations, they're subjective. And so it's really me saying you're not meeting my standards. And maybe that's a sales life thing, because we're very metric driven. How many calls did you make today? How many emails did you send today? How many sales did you make? And so the performance side is so easy to quantify in sales, but the culture side is harder and it's more subjective. And so those conversations become tricky. And so to your point, Dan, we do have behavioral norms here at Leadr. And one of those things, for example, is like proactive communication. But we don't have like very specific definitions around that. And it's what I prefer as a leader sometimes. And so it is very much, I think there was a chat comment earlier, your team becomes a reflection of the leader. Yeah. And so it really is, you're not meeting my expectations. But I have this nice company thing behind me that says you're also not meeting a company expectation. So there's that gray area that becomes a lot harder for me. So it's that clarity is kindness, right? And so it's like, here are the 3 ways you could do proactive comms. And one of these 3 ways is acceptable. Pick one and then let's go for it. In that other totally hypothetical situation.
Yeah, good thoughts for sure. Isaac, as you're hearing this, any thoughts or responses from you?
Yeah, I think that when performance management is an issue, it's so tempting to slip into being a best friend manager. you want to kind of avoid the conflict of having the hard conversation. And um, one thing that's so important to keep in mind um, is that when you're sitting there in the one-on-one with the person who's not performing well culturally or with regards to outcomes, you've got that kind of adjacency and recency bias where the conflict is in your face and you don't want to face it. You don't
Mhm.
want to dive in. Um, but what helps me in those situations is remembering that it's a bit what Courtney said with the analogy of one bad apple spoils the bunch. Like letting a low performer remain on the team hurts the team.
Yeah.
You got to focus on how much you care for the team. For everybody
Mm.
else on there, when you're talking to that one person who's, causing you to lose or putting you at risk of losing, because at the end of the day, you know, a team isn't a good team unless it's delivering results. And caring for the team means putting the team's needs ahead of the individual sometimes. And at the end of the day, if somebody isn't meeting their outcomes, aren't fitting into the culture, this means the role isn't the right fit for them. Unless they can grow into the role, they'd probably be happier elsewhere as well, in
Right.
some other
Right.
role, in some other
Mm.
position, in some other team. And so at the end of the day, um, it can be scary and hard to dive into that conflict, but it's going to be healthiest for the team, healthiest for the person to take that burden upon yourself and dive in. And so it's always worth it. It's always worth it to have those hard conversations.
Great thoughts,
It's
Isaac. Go ahead, Lexi.
it's kind of the opposite. We hear that phrase, rising tides raise all ships. And what you're saying, Isaac, kind of makes me think that low tide lowers all ships as well, right? The opposite
Mm.
is true. And so I guess I would ask Isaac, where's your balance of when do you as a leader, we care a lot about the individual
Yeah, no doubt.
alongside the team. So like where's the balance of how much grace do you give that individual before you to help them get there? Yeah, before you take the team's well-being first, I guess.
Yeah. No, that's the hard bit about it is um obviously if somebody's below the standard of excellence, be it cultural or outcomes, um, it's a coaching situation. It's not like, oh, okay, your pink slip's in the mail. Sorry, you drop below the bar. That's it. So no, I think it gets back to managing expectations about creating clear expectations within the team around, hey, you're gonna get coached for X amount of time. You're gonna get put on a performance improvement plan at some point, and making it so that I think one of the worst things you can do is be really disorganized about that, such that
Mm.
some people get like 5 months of coaching and some people get 1 month of coaching. And it's like, well, that person was probably a best friend of the, like he was probably friends with the manager. They probably knew each other outside of work. Like you can start creating a political environment to that point. So having really
Yeah.
clear expectations, having a good process in place to keep it fair and so folks know what they can expect when you're having that hard conversation with them. I think that that's the best way you can prepare and kind of hold yourself accountable for doing it the right way.
Yeah, great thoughts. I mean, sincerely, incredible thoughts around that. It's like you want to care for who the person is becoming and also what they're accomplishing, and it takes a balanced approach to be able to accomplish those things well. And so if the intent is growth and coaching and development, that doesn't happen overnight, and you have to be consistent. So good thoughts there. I got one last question before we kick over to Q&A, but so good here. Let's do this. I'm going to ask the question. I'd love to hear what the people in the chat think about it as well. So here's the question. Leading teams can be really hard. Understatement of the century. How do you do it well? Give them
Give 'em
donuts.
donuts.
Honestly, question answered. All right, we can move on to the next part. We have accomplished our time. That's hilarious, Dan. That's really, really funny. Okay. Leading teams can be really hard. How do you do it well? Ask for help. That's a good one, Crystal. What about I gotta ask better people, or ask a direct person instead of just throwing it to the wolves. Okay, so Lexi, why don't you kick us off first? Leading teams can be really hard. How do you do it well?
Well, one, I cry in my closet a lot by myself, I'm like, oh man, I failed today. I've got to get it all out. And then once I can burn off my emotional energy, I can come back a little bit more level-headed. So I think that beat for me is something that I've learned of when you're in a sticky situation, take a minute, get off Slack, get in person, talk it out. And then I just think vulnerability is such a huge component of that.
Yeah.
I don't have it all figured out. I can't do it all by myself. Please, direct report, tell me how to best lead you. All of those kinds of things. So, but also crying in your closet.
Good ideas. Isaac, what about you? Leading teams can be hard. How do you do it well?
Yeah, no, it's funny for me at the end of the day, the days where I feel like I had the biggest wins are the days when I feel like I made the best compromises.
Hmm.
It's really funny. It's like all day long it's compromises. Hey, do I extend this person more coaching time, or do I accelerate the process? Do I um take on this project knowing it's going to be a bigger burden on the team, but it's going to help the mission of the company? Or do I push back and say, hey, that project isn't worth it to put that stress on the team right now? It'd be better for us to use that energy for something else. You know, um, all day long it's compromises, and making a good decision in those situations means doing a lot of hard work to get information, to get clarity, to give clarity to other people. Um, it's not easy, right? That's why it's so hard. And for me, it's just a matter of, constantly checking myself, because I can very easily fall into the trap of being lazy. Like, oh, let's just make a snap decision. Let's not research it. Let's not do the due diligence. Oh, let's not take the time to get to know somebody. Let's just assume that my way of working is going to work for them. These sorts of things, they're traps. And constantly um, reminding yourself to stay accountable to best practices and to just keep learning, don't stagnate. I guess that's all I can really say.
That's great stuff, Isaac. Courtney, please respond. Also, if you are in the webinar chat, there's absolute fire being dropped in there right now. So such good ideas and comments there. So thank you for throwing those in there. Courtney, what about you? Leading teams.
I'm not sure I need to add anything. Lori just said to be honest and courageous in conversations. Holy cow. So that's gold. But I recently heard Craig Rochelle do a leadership talk, and the premise behind the talk was this new research that's showing after the last few years culturally, trust in others is at an all-time low. And I think anybody in any sort of leadership space can agree that without trust, we're not going to get anywhere, because we have they need to follow us, right? And so there's some level of our responsibility leading teams well involves building trust. And he gave this equation of transparency plus empathy plus consistency equals trust. And so that's just kind of been noodling around in my head since I heard it. And I sent my team a feedback request genuinely on this exact thing, asking them to candidly tell me how they felt I was doing in each of those categories. And it's been really helpful and insightful to me to figure out where I'm missing the mark. But that's all well and good. But I think this goes back to Lexi's point about isolation. You've got to do this in community. You've got to do this with other managers, whether that's discussing the tactical and bouncing ideas off of one another, or to Lexi's point, being really vulnerable around, hey, here's where I'm missing the mark. Here's where I don't know what to do. And so transparency, empathy, and consistency are kind of the pieces of that equation. But to know that you're hitting the mark, you've got to do that with other people.
Yeah, so good. Leadership can be super lonely. It can be super lonely. But by doing those things, it helps. So Courtney, I think hopefully you're responding. Heather asked if you could post the equation. So let's do this. We have about 10 minutes left. And so let's just go Q&A. And this is a time where there's some questions that have been submitted, so we can go there. But we would love to hear from you who are joining us for the webinar. What questions can we answer for you? What questions can we answer for you? To get one kicked off, let's see here. One that was sent in beforehand was, how do you work with, or how do you lead strong individuals when your style is not as strong as theirs? Maybe a different way to frame that question would be, how do you lead people who are exceptionally capable and potentially loud about it?
I'm not inherently a strong personality, so this one is a area of growth for me, a work in progress, to be totally transparent. But I think I'm gonna be a clanging gong here a little bit, but this idea of self-awareness, that am I feeling insecure? Am I feeling threatened? Or can I occupy my seat with the skills, gifts, talents that I bring, and allow this person to run in their lane, leveraging their skills, gifts, and talents effectively? Somebody in the chat had said this idea of not being the sage on stage, but the guide on the side. If I'm personally secure in what I bring to the table and doing the work to grow and be developed, then leading somebody in that space doesn't have to be such a rub, because I'm able to kind of let them run the way that they best exist in their role.
Love it. We're going to go to the next question so that we can continue to hit some of these. But one of the questions that came in was, what advice do you have on leading through change? Lexi, I'd love to hear your take on that. What advice do you have on leading through change?
Startups, sales teams at a startup in particular, I think change is the name of the game, right? And so for me, it is just it's constant communication, and reiterating where we're headed and why. So yeah, the expectation here is we're doing this today, it will change tomorrow. Let's go. And I think that does help, is that mindset of like, this is how it is. Probably most people are not in that boat of like, we change things every single day and are constantly iterating. So if I step back and think, for me, if this was a one-off change or maybe a big change, I just think really clear communication is very helpful. This is why this decision was made. This is how it's beneficial to you. This is how it's beneficial to the organization. And then something for me that I'm learning, because I am the loudest person in the room often, is inviting conflict.
Yeah.
Why don't you agree with this? What don't you like about this? What could be better about this? I might not be able to fix all of those problems, but talking about them at least helps. And I'll raise those up in a manage up kind of a way too. So I think that helps build the trust.
Yeah, good thoughts on that. I think communicating the why is super helpful, and then as much as you can, bringing people along in the journey and creating space for them to speak into it, to disagree, agree. What Courtney just said there in the chat. So and it's hard to do, especially if you feel like the change has to happen quickly, or here's where we're going, you need to make that adjustment. So good thoughts there. Okay, Isaac, I got one for you. You ready for it?
I hope so.
Okay, so how do you help your team know if they're winning?
Oh man, how do you help your team know if they're winning? Well, you celebrate things, right? When they deliver a project or something that's huge, you celebrate it. You don't keep it, hidden. You make sure that all the wonderful benefits their hard work did, that for the customer, for the rest of the organization, they know about it. You make sure you help drive that transparency coming into the team. Also, you know, feedback's one of those things where you should be giving good feedback more often than you're giving constructive feedback. Like that's one of those things that helps build people up, give them more trust in you. Like, hey, you don't just see my flaws, you see every single one of my victories. And so in your one-on-ones, like reinforcing that, showing that you're paying attention, showing that you see the good work they're doing. That's that's how I would say I'd accomplish that.
Nice. Nice. Okay. If you have questions, let's see here. Oh, here's a question. So I'm reading it through here. How do you become a better manager of your team when your own manager is difficult and or overreaching with their authority? Maybe overstepping with directives and assignments outside of your own. So people are trying to understand who's the boss, who do I listen to, what am I supposed to listen to, what directive is most important, how do you do that? Courtney, I saw you shaking your head. So it's also, like you and I work together, so I'm like, let me know if this is happening. Yeah, we probably need to have a conversation after this. But yeah, how would you do that? What happens when you have somebody, your direct supervisor, telling you something, and then somebody else who's telling you maybe conflicting or other things that need to be prioritized?
Yeah. Again, for context, Dan is my manager. This does not happen. But Dan and I have kind of mastered the art of shooting elephants or having tough conversations. So I feel like we can speak a little bit to this. And again, it'll probably start to sound redundant. But this is where clear, consistent feedback from you as the employee to your manager is vital. And you're going to have to flesh that out. The one thing, and maybe Lexi and Isaac might disagree with this, but I learned pretty early on in managing people is when this happens and I'm talking to my direct reports, you've got to be pretty tactful about not tipping your hand, because it's really tempting to want to undercut your supervisor so that it makes you look better with your direct reports. But what that ultimately does is erode trust with you, erode trust with your leadership, which then ultimately erodes trust with the organization. And so this is really between you and your manager, and a fun dance for you as a manager to get to dance with your employees, getting them clarity, over communicating, making sure they have what they need regardless of who it came from, and then fleshing that out with your supervisor.
Great thoughts, Courtney. We're like just a couple minutes from time. So I want to highlight something real quick, is connected exactly to what you said. And then I want to hear a last 5% from each of you. So kind of a last thought or last comment as we sign off here. Just something that's a helpful tool. So for those of you that have Leadr and have insights, remember that it's just a really helpful tool to actually take, how is my team doing? Do they know if they're winning? Do we have clarity? Do we have rapport? And be able to actually measure those things versus wonder about those things. So if you have those, connect with your CSM. They're more than happy to walk through how to engage those, how to utilize those to your team's benefit. And then if you don't have it, great, we can chat about it at some other time. But the idea is that it leads to less micromanaging of your people and more coaching, because you're getting real stats about what's there. So as we wrap up our time, I would love to hear from each of you. We'll start with you, Courtney. Maybe last 5%, last thought, something that you want to double click on.
Yeah, I think apparently I have a theme today, which is self-awareness, but that's been a learning process for me. And so the first thing is, you know more than you think, and also check your instincts. Taking a pause is one of the very best things I've learned to do as a leader, whether it's jump in to rescue someone when really the employee needs to learn to solve a problem themselves, or making assumptions about intent, or
Mhm.
about whether or not something has been completed, staying out of the weeds, those sorts of things. Reacting defensively, getting frustrated. Your gut is probably one of your greatest assets as a leader, but only when it's coupled with self-awareness. And so if I don't take a pause to check my gut, I'm doing myself and my team a disservice.
Great last 5%. Isaac, what about you?
Yeah, no, I was just reflecting on like, one of the things you get to look forward to as a manager is the wins. And there's nothing quite like hearing somebody else from another part of the organization come to you and compliment you for one of your people.
Yeah,
That is like the biggest boost. Whenever that happens,
it's
I
the
get,
best.
oh my gosh.
Yeah.
And it's so incredible. And that's the thing you get to look forward to when you're being a good leader. Your people are growing, people see it, people notice it, and everybody celebrates it. And it's so wonderful. And so I just wanted to throw that out there. That's the thing you get to really look forward to and get to really take in is those victories that you see your team accomplishing. And it's so good.
Yeah. Yes, 100% that. Lexi, bring us home. Last 5%. Anything else?
Crying in your closet is fantastic. Highly recommend. 10 out of 10. That's one thing we take away from here. The last one is one fast learning. I never expected to get a good job, for doing a hard thing. For example, releasing an employee and someone telling me good job. And so it made me realize that my job is to both celebrate the wins, like you said, Isaac, but also to do a good job on the backside of that as well, and care well on exits and the tough stuff. So
Awesome. Well, thank you, panelists, for joining us and for sharing your wisdom and where you've won and where you've tripped up or had some obstacles before. Really appreciate your authenticity and vulnerability as well as your expertise. So thank you for that. Thank you for those who joined us in the webinar. I know we didn't cover everything that there is possible to cover, but hopefully this is helpful to hear from some who wish they would have had some of this knowledge or some of this ability as they were first learning to lead. Have a great rest of the day and enjoy fall. Go Chiefs. See you guys later.